I would just put myself in the range of being a human being that believes that life in the universe is inevitable, and it always has been to me. Now it's becoming legitimized by Kepler and other scientific endeavors, so we're finding life everywhere. The building blocks of life seem to pervade the universe. So the whole idea of alien existence is becoming much, much more credible just in the last few years, whereas it's been not credible and considered science fiction, which is fine for me because I do science fiction. Kubrick is, or was, a real super intelligent, genius level human being, always eager to take on any kind of challenge. And if you look at his library of films, every one is completely different, based on tremendous amounts of research and studies and developments. And so when he decided, however he decided to make 2001, and he consciously decided that he wanted to find the best science fiction writer he could find, and he tracked down Arthur Clarke. He got Arthur Clarke to send him a whole number of different stories for him to mine through and try to find something that he thought was interesting. And he found The Sentinel, which was a short story that Arthur had written. So, well, that's the kind of idea that I think is really intelligent, scientifically valid, and that we could base a movie on. And he really objectively wanted to make the first really good, high-quality science fiction epic, following in the footsteps of Gone with the Wind or Lawrence of Arabia, kind of epic giant screen movies. And he felt a responsibility, because it was going to be in Cinerama and be shown on these giant 70 millimeter wide screens, that there had to be kind of an epic nature to it. I had already turned down George Lucas, who asked me to do the visual effects for Star Wars. And part of that was that I was already a director. I had already directed Silent Running, and so I wasn't really hanging out my shingle as a special effects guy at all anyway. But I read the script for Star Wars, and I thought, well, this is basically a comic book. This is not serious science fiction, the way 2001 had been, which I thought was very scientifically valid and analyzed and contributed to by major astrophysicists and visionaries like Arthur Clarke. So when Close Encounters came along, I said yes, whereas I had said no before, just from other circumstances, and I thought this will be a great opportunity to work under this amazing wunderkind director who had just done Jaws. I thought, well, this is a very interesting young director that I'd like to work with. We seemed to share a lot of visual ideas about what the movie should look like, which was totally different from Star Wars. Star Wars was hard spacecraft and stuff, and Close Encounters was more spiritual and interpretive in the content of it. So I thought that was a better visual opportunity, which turned out to be true for me. I remember a moment where he said, well, I don't want to see a UFO. I want to see something that looks like the landing lights on a jet landing at LAX at night. And I said, okay, I get it, And then when we talked about the mothership, he said, well, I'd like it to look like the refineries in San Pedro if you were looking at it upside down. I said, oh, I get that. So, I took my cues from him. Well, the UFOTOG, the name, which stands for, it's an acronym for UFO Photography, was an idea I started developing for my project, which was to get telescopes and tracker systems and try to photograph UFOs. And I'm saying to myself, well, I want to try to do this because I think I may know how to do it in a way that others don't, because I had access to these high-end cameras, access to engineers who build motion control systems that we use for movies that could be adapted to tracking systems and things like that. So I brought in some of my pals to try to affect this vision of photographing UFOs, and it led to the idea of possibly constructing a seemingly fictional story that could be dramatized with an actor or actress. And there's a whole story behind Ufotog, which is a story of a young family of a visionary entrepreneur man, and he is probably in some kind of tech industry thing, like an Elon Musk kind of thing. He's a young guy, he's a serial entrepreneur, he's been very successful. So he has a little extra money to play around with, and he's technical, he's geeky. His wife, and they're in a very happy marriage, his wife is an astrophysicist working at one of the major observatories. And she's on a big project to discover exoplanets. I thought I could make a dramatic science fiction movie about UFOs and use that as a cover for the effort to actually photograph UFOs and design the story so that if we actually got real photography, we could put that into the movie and suddenly the movie would become nonfiction. When I started making inroads in like with MUFON and the UFO community, I found that there were a number of really very highly placed and credible people like Jacques Vallée, like air traffic controllers, like doctors, like scientists, who took the whole thing very, very seriously, mixed in with a lot of people who were into auras and spirituality and other kinds of things that were more hearsay than science. And I didn't like that part of it. I never liked the hearsay part of it. I didn't like people telling their stories, even though many of them are tremendously compelling and heartbreaking, abduction stories in particular. I said, well, you can't prove any of that. There's no evidence. There's nothing to do. And I started asking those people, I said, has anybody ever mounted a scientific endeavor, a privately funded scientific endeavor to quantify what a UFO is made up of? And how fast does it go, and how high does it fly, and where does it come from, and is it changing state from plasma energy to aluminum or whatever? And the answer was no. No one had ever done that. And I said, well, I'm going to make that my mission. So that sounds like fun to me because I'm a geek. So that was the beginning of Ufotog, to try to spend at least some part of my hobby time going down that path like an amateur astronomer. And that's when I started finding out that talking about science fiction is fine. Talking about actually capturing UFOs is not fine. It's actually antagonistically greeted. Even in the reality television community, I couldn't get any traction at all. And I've got a really good resume. And I talked to people who wanted to do it, but couldn't do it, couldn't find funding for it, couldn't find commercials for it, couldn't get it, considered seriously by a television network or anybody else.